In a world where the power of education shapes the future, there exists a remarkable woman who has left an indelible mark on the lives of countless individuals. This is the story of Dr. Patricia Oyeshiku, a beacon of wisdom, a source of inspiration, and a guiding light to all fortunate enough to cross her path. Born in Miami as Patricia Worthy, she graduated and attended college in Knoxville, Tennessee, and traveled to Brazil. She traveled to San Francisco and then to Boston for the Peace Corps. And upon meeting the love of her life, Anthony, they then settled in San Diego, California, where her teaching career began and lasted for 3 decades.
What is so interesting is when I was, I think, 8 years old, there was a man who lived near us who could not read, and I just could not imagine a person who couldn't read. And I took it upon myself to teach him how to read. Now, I was only 8 at the time, and to see his progress was just amazing to me. And from that moment on, although I was that young, being a teacher, becoming a teacher was all I ever wanted to do. Yeah, and I grew up in Miami, and I went to segregated schools from kindergarten all the way through high school, and then I went to HBCU for college. That was all black, and I was never actually in a class with people who didn't look like me until I went to Peace Corps training at the University of New Mexico, and I was like, who are these people? Well, of course, before people, even when they see me and they see the name, they just assume that my husband is Japanese. So I have lived all of my Oyeshiku life with people saying, are you Japanese? Or if I order something and I have to go pick it up, by the look on their face, I know that they think that I'm Japanese. Except a Yoruba. Any Yoruba would recognize the name immediately, Oyeshiku. So that was sort of interesting. And I'm sure when I came to Morse, everybody probably just thought I was married to a Japanese person. All of our children, including our own children and all of our grandchildren, have Yoruba middle names.
Let's now hear from some of her former students and colleagues.
Miss O she was the teacher that actually cared about the students, not just about her teachings, but that she cared about each and every one of us individually. You know, she took the time and she shared the information, what she was teaching, or how we were doing, or what was going on in our lives. And she showed it. Not only did she talk to us, but she showed how much she cared about each and every one of us.
For me, it was as a really shy kid, it was a place to be heard. Morse High School was a big school, and it was a predominantly black school, and I was the white girl, the fat white girl, and the fat white girl who was raised in a weird church. So I dressed funny, and I had all of the things that made me an outsider. And her class was a safe place. And in that class, everybody had a voice. And it was a first for me. It was an absolute first for me.
So, Miss O was the first one that I really feel told me how creative I was when it came to my writing, and that there was a real talent there. And I loved writing, and it's how I express myself. But I really loved her class because of the discussions that we had on Friday. It was something that was really untraditional in how they were teaching, how teachers were trying to relate to students. And I think she did a really incredible job with that.
I can't recall the first time that, like, my first day walking into class. But, and I honestly never knew who she was going into English in my senior year. But the first few interactions that I got, she was just like another mother, honestly, to a lot of the students. She really exuded a lot of care and support, and that kind of really was just a part of her personality that we came to learn. I felt really cared for in the class, and she really took the time to get to know each one of her individual students. She really didn't group, kids together like all the at-risk students and, all the straight A students. She really just brought everybody together. And that's what I really felt like a really positive thing happening in her classroom.
I think finding out that she was married to a Nigerian was interesting because I'm Nigerian myself. And so every time I heard Miss Onyeshiku, I wondered if she was Japanese. And then all of a sudden, when I got into her class, I found out that she was married to a Nigerian. And I was just like, okay, that's interesting. But it was also because she was firm. Miss O was very firm with me. I wasn't the best of student. I was a very disruptive person. I had a lot of anger issues, and she checked me. She was one of the only teachers that was able to check me and told me about myself and how I am an African person and that I should have some decorum, some respect for myself and my culture. And that really got me because she was the only person that really told me that to my face.
So for Mrs. Oyashiku, she was an amazing part of my first year at Morris High School. I actually got to shadow her my junior year as part of the Future Teachers of America. So before she was even my teacher, I was able to shadow her because all of the students at Morris used to rave about this Mrs. O, and she's the best teacher ever. The shadow of this teacher that every single student I run into talks about and admires so much. So those group discussions were really impactful and important because we got to go round circle in her class and kind of talk about our different perspectives. So that was really amazing.
Things change. The more things change, the more they remain the same. And I think the reason I was able to last throughout 4 decades was because my values never changed. My teaching style never changed. And I think that was to my benefit. Sometimes people try to change with the times, but the values, those are the things that are most important. So no matter what was going on around me or on the campus, those values remained steady.
What's interesting about me is that I actually am current principal, but I also taught here at Morris High School from 2000 until 2013. And so when I came to Morris, Dr. Oyashiko, we called her Miss O, had been a teacher here for some years. And so she was definitely, I would say, legendary. She and I both taught in the same department. She taught English, I taught English. When I came in as a new teacher, and she was a veteran teacher at that time, definitely brought some stability to the department in the sense that she had been here for many years, a very respected educator on this campus. People loved Miss O. So as an African-American new English teacher, looking up to an African-American English teacher who has so much respect on this campus and was loved by both staff and students, she definitely was like a mentor figure in that sense, where I felt as though I wanted to make sure that when I was done teaching, that folks looked up to me in a similar way.
For Mrs. O, what stood out for me is, coming back to her classroom as a graduate from Morris, just the the love, the admiration she had, the impact she made on my husband, even my daughter, um, Jasmine. And, she just always made you feel like we're still part of your class. So Mrs. O is just always a warm hug. Whether you're in her class, a present or past student, Mrs. O just always left so much love for us to take and receive and to share. And always a reminder, that our voices matter.
Well, the biggest adaptation for me was when I began to have students whose parents I also taught. And that was interesting because the students were so different from the parents. And when the parents came to open house, I used to think to myself, is this the same person who sat in this room at 17 and now they're telling me that their daughter is not doing well? There's some things that you have to change with the times, but that's just inherent in life, period, not just in teaching. You had to keep up with what was happening. Of course, technology changed, so you had to become conversant in that. So you had to really keep up with everything that was going on.
Not only did Dr. Oyashiku teach, but all while raising a family. Let's hear from them.
Well, that was a long, long time ago, around 1966 or something like that. Okay, I was in college then in Pullman, Washington. Okay, and she was at my college she was with the Peace Corps at that time. So she was at my college trying to recruit people. Okay, well, she had a little office there, and somebody told me, "Hey, look, there's a little black lady there. You want to go meet her?" Then basically, that's what the secretary there told me. I said, "Okay," So went into our office, and that's where it all started. Then we started introducing each other, and then before you know it, 55 years later, we're still together.
I worked for the Peace Corps, traveling all over the West Coast. I went to Washington State University in Pullman, Washington. And that, if you've ever been to Pullman, that's just a little cow town in Washington State. And our Peace Corps table, our recruiting table, was next door to the International Students Office. And the guy I was with, Peter Walsh, he said, "Oh, there's a guy who's been coming by here." And he said, "I think that guy likes you." I'm like, "I'm not looking for a man. I was a real career girl and doing everything." And he asked me to meet. So then we met because he kept hanging around the table. Of course, he always tells me that I tell a different story than the one he tells, but this is the true story. And so we met, and the third day he knew me, he asked me to marry him. I said, "You are crazy." But anyway, I married him a year later. Nobody meets anybody in Pullman, Washington. We went back there for our 25th wedding anniversary, and I said to myself, how in the heck did I meet anybody in this town? Because it's not even on the beaten track. May 25th will be our 55th wedding anniversary. And when I married, I thought, I'll try this out for a little while, see how it works. And here we are.
Hello, I'm happy to be here and talk about the woman I actually call Mana. I don't call her Mom, and that's just a nickname that works for me. But I'm sure for her it was very tough. She spent a lot of time at Morse High School and a lot of times with and around her students and her coworkers. And I would just say in terms of growing up with her as my Mana, she would wake up at 4 a.m. to get ready for school and get breakfast ready, and she would actually start dinner. So sometimes by the time we came downstairs, my sister and I, she was already gone for work. So when she got home from work, she was exhausted. But I will say we always had a hot breakfast. We always had dinner together. It was tough for sure, but she was a big supporter in everything we did, all of our sports and after school activities as much as she could be. But I imagine it must have been very exhausting for her. I would definitely say it was the struggle between being all she could to her students, being all she could to my dad, and being all she could to us. And it's impossible to give 100% to each of those things every day. It's absolutely impossible. And I know that she struggled with that. Because if you know anything about my Mana, she goes 100 miles an hour at all times. But with doing that, you can't be at your best. And you can't give to those things that might require more. So I think that she still struggles with that, trying to be everything to everybody equally. And sometimes you just can't. Because I know her career as an educator, I hate to say teacher because that sounds limiting in terms of my mom, Mana. As an educator, she also taught at the junior college and college level. And, I would spend many a drive when you could leave your kids in the car for a minute while she was getting her master's degree and getting her doctorate, waiting for her or going to class with her as a young child with my sister. So I knew she wanted more. But it's really hard to balance all of that. And that's probably true for, any person today. It's hard to balance having that career, being there for your students, that might call in the middle of the night for something. So it was a lot. It was a lot.
I think the biggest challenge was probably in the early 80s when there was so much going on. That was sort of the beginning of this whole kind of gang culture. And that's the only time I was speaking at so many funerals. That was the only time that I considered leaving the profession. It was just so overwhelming to me. And these were guys that I always knew the good side of them. I never saw all this other side that was outside of the classroom. And it really was quite heartbreaking. That was the biggest challenge. That was the only time I had considered, I thought, why am I here and what am I doing? And how have these good people, why are these good people doing bad things? And so I had to really do a lot of soul searching at that point. And of course, I talked to my classes about it because we talked about everything.
But she always wanted it to be separate. And I could probably count the number of times I went to my mom's classroom over her 30 plus years, probably 10 or less. She always wanted to keep her classroom part separate. I don't know what went on in her classroom. I know she had pictures and like a Friday discussion. We would go for basketball games and stuff, but her classroom, for whatever reason, she always wanted, my sister and I to be separate from that.
Let me say this. She loved teaching. And I love the fact that she loved teaching, It's a work in progress, Sometimes, family lives come ahead of our teaching and sometimes the other way around. But anyway, we worked it together, through the years. We make it work together, like her teaching and our love for teaching and the family life. So with that, it's been quite a while, but we're together now. I mean, everything is just working perfectly now. I mean, the teaching is over, but you still remember all the good times we had together. I'm proud of her. Very proud of her.
The fondness was, I guess, traveling a lot. Our shared love of reading. Going to thrift stores with her, which wasn't cool then, but is cool now.
I think the children is my number one memorable moment. When the first girl came, Kama, and then that was a real celebration for us. And then we just sat down on Kama, you know, enjoying Kama. Until he said, hey, we better try for another one. That was 6 years later. Then the Chandra came, So, but I think the children is my joy, a memorable joy moment.
Absolutely. As current principal, I still have former students who come to Moores, and they sometimes will often ask about Miss O. She's still teaching here, or if I still keep in contact with her. I can tell you that some of my memories of her is just how she kept it real, right? She was in meetings, um, if folks were going on and on tangents or whatnot, she kept it real. She cut it off, or she would just say, she would speak her mind in a very true, authentic way. So I think that's one memory I have of her. I can also say that even though I am principal and she's retired, we still keep in communication with one another. She's someone who always talks about free retirement, right? So there are some educators who will retire and they'll come back to the school site to either sub or whatnot. Miss O said no, like, I'm done. And so she retired, and she calls it free retirement. She loved her grandchildren. So she would often dote on them and talk about her grandchildren, show us pictures of her grandchildren when she was here as a teacher. So she had a love for family as well as her students. Many students also remembered her very well for her Friday discussions. So I think I asked her one time if I could actually kind of pop in and see and watch the Friday discussion. But I want to say, and I can't be for sure, I think she told me no, because
And I didn't allow anyone in the class. No one could come in.
those sessions were private for her classes. Like, they had to feel comfortable in a trusting, they didn't know me. So I think that I wasn't even allowed to pop in to one of her Friday sessions for that reason. Because I think she wanted to keep those sessions sacred to the nature of her class.
Well, Miss O had a special place in my heart. I didn't talk to a lot of my teachers at school, but I had shared some very personal things with Miss Oyushika about my life that no one ever knew. They always knew I had this big smile on my face. And Miss O taught my high school boyfriend, and then she taught my daughter there. So my daughter was her first grand student that she taught. And so I just carried a lot of love and, everything that she had said to me to, it's not your fault, keep your head up, keep going forward. She just always told me to keep putting one foot in front of the other and keep moving forward.
One of the things, looking back on it, it's been so many years. One of the things that I remember, because, we had discussion Fridays, and it was hearing everybody else's lives. And I think that for me, it was really learning about so many other people's lives. Being a teenager and just being all up in myself, I don't know that I had ever really stopped to consider everybody else having their own journeys and their own life stories and their own, I just thought everybody else knew what it was all about, and I thought everybody else had it figured out, and I was just the one weirdo. Hearing that other people had struggles, that blew my mind. That other people had struggles.
Well, she was not only my teacher, but she was my mentor. I was able to confide in her about a lot of personal things that were going on in my life. And then when it came to, determining what I was going to do with my career, if I was going to go to school, I would talk to her about it. And I remember telling her I was joining the Army, and she was like, "You are?" And I was like, "Yes, Miss O." And she was like, "Well, okay." But it did lead, later on in life, I did realize that the start of my career started with Miss O's class, because I fell in love with writing. I fell in love with communications, and it led into what I do now, which is public relations, and I'm a communications manager for a tech company. And I help improve brand awareness by telling people stories.
There were several moments just, being in class, especially during the Friday discussions. Everyone looked forward to Friday discussions with Miss O's class. I myself look forward to it also. There wasn't anything in particular that I could recall. This is well over 3 decades ago, or almost 2 decades ago. So there really isn't anything specific, but one thing that did stand out were the Friday discussions, and how, although it was somewhat of a free day for all the students, because of the topics that students brought to the discussion table, and what she was willing to talk about with her students, that was one of the most impactful things that really stood out to me. I really felt like I got a grasp of knowledge and learning from different topics that we discussed. She really took the time to really screen through each topic that the students wanted to talk about, and really stayed clear of certain ones. It really brought to light maybe some things that were happening in current events and things like that. But I really just enjoyed those Friday discussions.
Well, I'll let you know how this started. I started teaching at Morris in 1970, no, on my birthday, actually, in November of 1970. And at that time, I taught African American literature. And whenever we began to talk about the literature, it would always evolve into just talking in general. And I thought, we're getting off the topic too much in my own head. And so that was when I began discussion. I thought, maybe we need a time that we can just talk, nothing related to the literature, just talk in general. And I started with a box, which I still have in my office, and everything was anonymous. You put something in the box that you wanted to discuss. I was always in control of the box, and I read whatever was in there, and then we discussed it. And now that in my retirement, and now that I have this Facebook presence, I think that's why we know one another so well. Because when we talked on Fridays, nothing was off limits. But when we talked on Friday, I mean, sometimes there were tears, there was a lot of laughter, there was, of course, it was loud. But what I hear now is that I gave everybody a voice, and nobody was listening to young people then, and it wasn't. I had to be non-judgmental. I learned probably as much as they learned, but from what I hear on the grapevine, those were the most meaningful days of every single week. And I think it was because even now, young people don't have a voice. Nobody's listening to them. And that made our class very, very different. And no one ever told me to stop.
Learned is the value of being yourself and keeping it real. So I felt like that was a way that she modeled herself to our staff and students when she was a teacher here at Morris High School, and she kept it real. And so I don't believe there was an actual different, I don't think that she was Miss O, in class, and Patricia outside of class in that sense. I felt like she was one and the same. And so I felt like that was a lesson that I learned and took with me, is that be yourself, be authentic. You know, if the students are going to love you, they're going to love your authentic self. They don't want an imposter.
Another thing that I learned is just following your passion. And it's okay to, you know, if there's people that didn't agree or approve of anything that you wanted to do, but as long as you felt like that's what your purpose was, then to follow through with that.
She made me enjoy writing and reading and literature. She really gave me the opportunity to hone into how I wrote, and how I got interested in like reading African American literature, learning so much about our history. She was really dedicated about historical Black literature. And so she really introduced me to a lot of those literature and got me loving to read.
I think one most important way that she really impacted those particular students was the care and support that she showed every single day, regardless if students came in late. You know, she would obviously reprimand them in a really loving manner, but she really held her standards really high at the same time. I know she was always open after school. She was always open to helping students outside of the school time. And I think that was probably the most important thing that kind of stands out to me is her willingness to be there for kids when they needed her the most. And then also just being accessible to the students at all times throughout the school year as well.
Well, there are a lot of moments that stand out, but honestly, it's just going in during breaks, like during lunch, and talking to her about a lot of things that were going on in our personal lives. She always offered a lot of good, valid, sound advice without any judgment, and it just made her really approachable and trustworthy where we could take anything to her.
I've given this some thought since I've been retired since 2008. And this is, it's really sort of silly when I think about it. I never really felt an impact as I was doing it because I was just doing it. You know, I was just teaching. That was what I always wanted to do. But when I retired and when this new thing that I resisted called Facebook started, and the student who tried to get me on Facebook, I said, no, I don't want to do that, you know, blah, blah, blah. What has impacted me is the long-lasting effects that students tell me they have from having been in my class. So, and it's something I never, ever expected. For example, here you are, an old lady. I never expected to see you at 60. You know, I never expected to hear people talk about how much the class meant to me. But during my actual time at school, I just never thought about an impact that I was making. Even through the whole Teacher of the Year thing, it just never even occurred to me that there was anything different about what I was doing. Because it was how my teachers had been to me. So I didn't see anything different about what I was doing.
The world that the Oyashikus have woven together through their shared love of travel has also been part of their enriched lives. The lure of new horizons was irresistible. They had a thirst for adventure that could not be quenched by the Pacific Ocean's gentle waves. They have ventured to the ancient lands of Asia, marveled at the grandeur of the Great Wall of China, and found peace within the serene temples of Thailand. Each destination was a fresh brush stroke on the canvas of their shared experiences. Their travels have taken them to the vibrant continent of Africa, especially Nigeria, which is the native land of Mr. Oyashiku. They immersed themselves in the rich history of Egypt, embarking on trips to Europe, a continent steeped in more history and culture, including Russia, Hungary, as well as the Czech Republic. As they have strolled along the romantic canals of Venice, basked in the artistic brilliance of Paris, and explored the historic depths of Rome, their European escapade added a layer of sophistication and elegance to their growing travel repertoire. The Oyashikus have traveled to every continent except Antarctica. Dr. Oyashiku's published books are an intriguing blend of education, pastimes for collectors, relationships, and humor. Teaching out of the box encourages educators to innovate and inspire. The thrill of the hunt celebrates the quest for collectibles through thrift stores, antique stores, and the classics of music. To Mrs. O with Love acknowledges the significant role she had in her students' lives. And You Know the Relationship is Over When provides a humorous take on the ending of relationships. Dr. Oyashiku's books are a testament to her ability to weave together different themes and create compelling narratives. They are not just books. They are journeys into the heart of education and life. They challenge us, inspire us, make us laugh. And above all, they make us think. Dr. Oyashiku's books are indeed a treasure trove of wisdom and insight.
Find someone that is relatable to you. Find someone that probably has been through some of the same experiences that you will be going through with, you know, through your life. And then just finding that confidant and trustworthy person. And then you also need someone that will be candidly honest and direct with you. Not everything is you're not always gonna like what you hear. And that's not a bad thing. You know, that helps shape you and it helps mold you into the adult that you are today. And I definitely give a lot of credit to Miss O because I have the career that I have because she's the first one that saw my ability in communication. And I didn't even know I had it.
Oh my goodness. Whether it's college or trade school, get yourself some sort of education so that you can always have your own financial security. Don't ever be dependent on anybody. Always have your own financial security. Whatever way that takes, get your own financial security.
Don't be afraid to share.
I would say, don't be intimidated to not ask questions. It's okay not to know everything. If something's learnable, it's doable. If it's doable, it's learnable. We have the capacity to really take on much more than we even think we be possible of. We have potential. So I want to say, plant the seeds, ask the questions, and learn. Be willing to learn from every experience and every conversation or connection that you make with people, especially our teachers, mentors. It's important. What we don't know, we don't know. So ask for help.
Oh, I just had this question not too long ago from a few counselors that are kind of up and coming. They just got into the profession. One thing I would recommend would be to stay focused on the relationship that you build with each and individual student that you do have that comes into your classroom, regardless of their background, regardless of their ethnicity or race, or even their past experiences. Taking them in for who they are and where they're at in their education, and being that trusted adult for them to ensure that they get the best quality education in your classroom in particular. And I feel like that's what Miss O really gave to us. I wasn't the best student in high school, but I felt like Miss O always treated me with the respect and the dignity that I deserved, even though I might not have been paying attention at that time to those things. She really planted those seeds in my head to really allow me to grow as a student for myself too.
Well, you know what? I didn't see it change so much then, but it certainly is changing now. Because right now is very disheartening. I'm glad that I'm not teaching now. I don't know if I would last because so much history is being erased, and I think that's dangerous. It's dangerous. It's not truthful, and it's gonna cause problems. Again, see, I don't think that education changes. I think what happens is you need a teacher, number one, who knows who he or she is. You need a teacher who is courageous. I was courageous throughout my entire career because I had that kind of self-confidence that those little black schools in Miami gave me. And when you're going from that position, you just hold steady to what you believe in and how you do things. Because all you need is a good teacher who understands you, who values you, who sees you for who you are. I never taught a class of 30 in the same way because I had 30 different personalities in that class. So it was important for me to know how to reach each one. And so if teachers don't, and it's not an easy thing to do, and if teachers can't do that, you're working with a great disability, in my opinion. Well, what's really sad is we don't have enough people going into education. I think, for example, my grandson would be a wonderful, wonderful teacher, but that's not part of what he wants to do. You have so few, especially black males, going into teaching. And I don't know how you make the profession more engaging for young people who are thinking about it. Number one, they need to be paid more. If you look at teaching and going into tech, there's no comparison in terms of the pay. Many teachers don't feel that they're valued. And what's happening now in education, it looks like all the teachers' rights are being taken away. I remember a long, long time ago, I did an interview for the Miami Times, which is a black paper in Miami, and I said, if I had it to do all over again, I would not have become a teacher. Now, I got so much pushback, but my mother's like, have you gone crazy? Did they make you say that? Why are you saying something like that? But what I meant was, in my day, you didn't have many options. You know, you became a teacher, maybe a doctor, maybe a lawyer. You know, you didn't have all those options. I always said, if I had to do all over again, I probably would have tried to be a writer for Essence magazine or something. But on the other hand, and I wasn't disparaging the profession, I was just trying to make the point that things have changed, you know, and the same people today, young people who would have become teachers during my time, there's so many other options that they have, and people are exploring those options. So teaching, the profession has to really come up with something to bring these young people back in. I think teaching is one of the most noble professions, and the disadvantage of teaching is that everybody's had a teacher, so everybody thinks they know exactly what teachers should do and how they should behave and what they should teach. Everybody hasn't had a writer, or some haven't had a doctor, but everybody thinks that they know what's best for teaching because they've had a teacher.
I would say 3 words would be legendary, loved, and empowered.
Purple, love, and outstanding. That's my list to go.
I would have to say loving is one of them. During the 90s, late 90s, there wasn't a lot of interesting kind of teaching that was happening, so I would definitely call her very dynamic in her teaching skills. And then patience. You know, she had such a threshold for her patience in working with her students. It was really amazing to watch all year in my senior year, and it's something that kind of stands out to me and kind of something that I wanted to hold on to for myself to really focus on, especially now that I'm in education myself, is being patient with the kids that I work with.
Oh my gosh. 3 words, one of a kind.
Empathetic. Educated. And compassionate. Oh, that just kind of made me cry. For heaven's sakes.
Loving, okay, loving, and very loving.